The word appears in verse 5, and most readers pass through it without a second thought. Abraham says to his servant, "Stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship, and come again to you." Worship, that is the word the translators chose. But the Hebrew is shachah, and shachah does not mean what the English word worship has come to mean in a 21st century context. It does not mean singing or prayer or quiet contemplation or the lifting of hands. Shachah means to bow down, to prostrate oneself, to press one's face to the ground in the presence of a superior. It is the posture of a subject before a king, of a petitioner before a judge, of a creature before its creator. When Abraham says he is going to worship, he is describing an act of total physical submission. The problem is that the act he is about to perform, binding his son, raising a knife, taking a life, has nothing in common with the picture of bowing. You do not bow down to God by killing your child. Or do you? The tension sits in the sentence and refuses to be ignored. Abraham tells his servants he will worship, and then he says he will come back with the boy. I and the boy will go over there and worship, and come again to you. He does not say, "I will come back alone." He does not say, "I will return, though I do not know what will become of the boy." He says, "We will come again." The grammar is unequivocal. 2 people go, 2 people return. But the command God gave 3 days earlier was singular and devastating. "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering." A burnt offering does not walk home. A burnt offering is consumed. So how can Abraham possibly say, with such quiet certainty, that both of them are coming back? Is he lying to his servants? Is he in denial? Is he hoping that God will change his mind at the last moment? These questions are not modern inventions. The Jewish interpretive tradition has wrestled with this verse for centuries. One strand of rabbinic commentary suggests that Abraham was speaking prophetically, that the Spirit had revealed to him that Isaac would not die. Another strand, more startling, proposes that Abraham was speaking a deliberate untruth to his servants because he did not want them to interfere with the divine command. But neither of those explanations satisfies the full weight of the text, because the text does not explain Abraham's inner reasoning. It simply gives us the sentence and leaves the contradiction exposed. Abraham says he will worship, and he says he will come back with the boy, and the reader has to decide what kind of faith is operating here. This is where the word shachah becomes more than a vocabulary note. The root meaning of shachah is to bow down so low that you cannot see what is in front of you. The posture itself implies trust in the one you are bowing to. When a subject prostrates before a king, he does not know what the king will do next. He cannot see the king's face. He is entirely dependent on the king's character. That is the position Abraham is describing. He is not saying he understands how the contradiction will be resolved. He is saying he is putting himself in a posture where the resolution is no longer his responsibility. Worship, for Abraham, is the act of bending so low that the outcome belongs entirely to God. And yet the knife remains. The wood is loaded on Isaac's back. The fire is in Abraham's hand. The posture of worship does not change the physical reality of what is about to happen. Abraham walks up the mountain, builds the altar, arranges the wood, binds his son. The text gives us each detail with clinical precision. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. In that moment, the posture of worship and the act of killing are simultaneous. The hand that has bowed to God is the hand that holds the blade. The faith that says we will come back is the same faith that is about to drive the knife downward. The contradiction is not resolved, it is held in tension, and the tension is the point. Here is the application that lands in the present without any need for a bridge. Every person who has ever tried to follow God has faced a moment where obedience and outcome are in open conflict. You do something you believe God has asked of you, and it looks like it is destroying everything you love. You tell yourself you trust God, but the evidence of your eyes says otherwise. The prayer you prayed for healing was answered with silence. The relationship you surrendered resulted in deeper isolation. The step of faith you took left you standing on a precipice with no visible landing. In those moments, the temptation is to believe that you misunderstood God, that you must have done something wrong, that the contradiction means your faith has failed. But the text of Genesis 22 does not allow that conclusion. Abraham did not misunderstand. Abraham did exactly what God commanded. And the contradiction was not the sign of a mistake, it was the space where worship happened. The ancient world understood what it meant to offer a child. It was not unique to Israel. The surrounding cultures practiced child sacrifice to Molech and Chemosh, and the practice was horrific precisely because it was religiously motivated. A father would take his firstborn and burn him on an altar because he believed the gods demanded it. What makes Abraham different is not that he was willing to kill his son. What makes him different is that he believed God would raise him from the dead. The author of Hebrews makes this explicit. He considered that God was able even to raise him from the dead, from which, figuratively speaking, he did receive him back. Abraham did not walk up the mountain expecting to bury Isaac. He walked up the mountain expecting a resurrection. The word shachah was not a euphemism for murder. It was the posture of a man who believed that the God who gave him Isaac in his old age could also give him back Isaac after death. But the text of Genesis does not say that. The New Testament commentary fills in the inner reasoning. But in the Genesis account itself, Abraham says nothing. He walks, he builds, he binds, he reaches for the blade. The only words he speaks on the mountain are when Isaac asks where the lamb is, and Abraham answers, God himself will provide the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. That sentence is not a prediction, it is a confession of faith. Abraham does not know how God will provide. He only knows that God will. The lamb is not on the mountain yet, but the God who owns the mountain has not failed yet either. Abraham bows and keeps walking. The cultural context of the mountain itself deepens the weight. Moriah, the place where this happens, becomes in later tradition the site of the temple in Jerusalem. The same mountain where Abraham raises the knife is the mountain where thousands of lambs will be slaughtered year after year for the atonement of Israel. The connection is not accidental. The text says, on the mount of the Lord it shall be provided, and generations of readers have seen in that provision a pattern that echoes forward. But here in the moment there is no provision yet. There is only the wood, the fire, the bound sun, and the raised hand. The hand is the hand of worship, and it is about to descend. Part 1 must end here, at the point of maximum tension. Abraham's hand is raised. The knife is in his grip. The word shachah has been unpacked. The contradiction has been exposed, and the posture of worship has been reframed as total dependency on a God who has not yet acted. The viewer is left with the hand suspended in midair, waiting to see whether the posture of worship leads to the slaughter or to something else entirely. The answer is not yet given. The tension is unresolved. The next part will have to answer what happens when the hand finally comes down. The hand is suspended, the knife is raised, and then the angel of the Lord calls from heaven, and everything stops. The voice says the same thing twice, Abraham, Abraham. And Abraham answers with the same word he used for his servants, here I am. He is still present, still listening, still in the posture. He has not yet brought the blade down. The text does not tell us whether he was going to. It only tells us that the voice came before the hand descended, and that the voice said what Abraham had already believed: do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. The word that shifts everything is not a new command, it is a confirmation that the test is complete. The test was not the killing. The test was the willingness. And the Hebrew text makes this explicit. God says, you have not withheld your son. The verb is chashak, which means to hold back, to retain, to keep for yourself. Abraham's obedience was not measured by what he did to Isaac, but by what he did not do to his own claim over Isaac. He did not hold his son back from God. He opened his hand, and in that opening the test ended. The ram was already in the thicket, but Abraham could not see it until he had shown that he would not reach for it himself. This is the moment where the word shachah finally reveals its full meaning. The posture of bowing, pressing your face to the groundies, the posture of a person who cannot see what is coming. Abraham's forehead was on the dirt. He could not see the thicket. He could not see the ram. He could not see that provision was already present, tangled and waiting. But he knew the one he was bowing to, and that knowledge was enough. The worship happened in the blindness, not in the sight. The worship was not the relief of seeing the ram, it was the 3 days of walking, the binding, the raised hand, the willingness to bring it down. Worship was what Abraham did before he knew how it would end. The ram appears only after Abraham's hand is stopped. The text says Abraham lifted his eyes and saw the ram, caught in a thicket by its horns. The Hebrew word for ram here is ayil, and it carries a specific weight in the sacrificial system. A ram was an animal of atonement, a substitute for a human life. The horns are mentioned and not the body, not the feet, but the horns, the part of the animal that in later Israelite practice would be smeared with blood on the altar. The ram is already trapped, already available, already designated for this moment, but Abraham could not see it until he had released his grip on his son. The provision was there all along, but the timing of its revelation depended on the posture of the one who needed it. What Abraham does next is astonishing. He takes the ram and offers it as a burnt offering in place of his son. But the language is important. He offers it instead of his son. The Hebrew word is takat, which means under or in place of. The ram goes under Isaac's sentence. This substitution is not a happy accident. It is the theological center of the entire chapter. Isaac does not die, but something dies in his place. And Abraham names the place the Lord will provide. The Hebrew is Yahweh Yire, which literally means Yahweh will see. The verb ra means to see, but in Hebrew seeing and providing are the same action. When God sees, God supplies. The mountain is named for the seeing, not for the provision, because the seeing is the provision. This is where the present-day reader must stop and feel the weight of what is being said. Every person who has ever wrestled with a difficult obedience has asked the same question: what if God does not provide? The answer from this mountain is not a guarantee that a ram will always appear. The answer is that God sees. And because God sees, the provision is not the point, the relationship is. The question Abraham faced was not whether he would lose Isaac, but whether he would trust the one who held Isaac. The ram was the evidence that the trust was not misplaced, but the trust was the substance of the worship. If God had not provided the ram, would Abraham have been wrong to trust? The text does not allow that question, because the text is written from the other side of the provision. But the 3 days on the road to Moriah were lived without that certainty. Abraham walked in the seeing that had not yet happened. He trusted that God saw what he could not. The cultural context of the mountain confirms this. The writer of Chronicles later identifies Moriah as the site of the temple, where the Ark of the Covenant rested and where the presence of God dwelled between the cherubim. The temple would be the place where Israel brought their offerings, where the priests would lay hands on the animals and confess sins, where the blood would be poured out at the base of the altar. And all of that sacrifice was built on the pattern of this single ram, caught in a thicket, offered by a father who had been willing to offer his son. The temple was a constant reminder that substitution was not a theory, it was the structure of the relationship between God and humanity. Something dies so that someone else can live. The question is always whether the one receiving the substitute will recognize the gift. But there is a deeper tension that still needs resolution. If the test was complete when Abraham raised the knife, why did the ram need to be offered at all? Could God not have simply stopped the hand and sent Abraham home with Isaac? The answer lies in the nature of worship. Worship is not completed by intention alone. Intention must find expression. Abraham's willingness was the offering, but the offering needed a physical form. The ram becomes the vessel for that willingness. Abraham does not walk down the mountain empty-handed. He walks down with the ashes of a burnt offering and a boy who is alive. The worshiper carries the residue of the substitute. He knows that something died in the place of his son, and that knowledge will never leave him. Here the application becomes unavoidable. Most of us believe we have surrendered something to God when we say the words of surrender. But words are cheap. The surrender that counts is the one that reaches the hand toward the unthinkable, the one that binds the thing we love most and lays it on the wood, the one that does not look for a way out until God provides one. Abraham's worship was not a feeling. It was a series of physical actions that took 3 days and ended with a knife in the air. Worship is that costly. The comfort of this passage is not that God always provides a ram. The comfort is that God always sees. And the seeing is itself the provision. The ram is offered, and Abraham names the place. He calls it the Lord will see. The name is future tense, not has seen, but will see. The provision points forward to every generation that will come to this mountain and ask whether God sees their need. The answer is built into the name of the place itself. God sees. God will see. God always sees. But the seeing does not mean the knife never rises. The seeing does not mean the journey is painless. It means that when the hand is raised, the one who holds it is not alone. The final movement of the passage is the angel's second call. By myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son. I will surely bless you and make your offspring as numerous as the stars of heaven and as the sand on the seashore. The blessing comes after the test, not before. The multiplied descendants, the victory over enemies, the blessing of all nations, these are the consequences of a worship that did not hold back. Abraham receives the promise he was already carrying, now confirmed by divine oath. The covenant is reinforced through the very act that seemed to threaten its destruction. The heavy last paragraph must say what the passage means for the person who has been reading this script. It must land with the weight of everything that has been said, without summarizing. It must be the final word, the one that stays in the room long after the video ends. Worship is not what you give up. Worship is what you are willing to give up, standing with open hands, trusting that the one who sees you has already provided what you cannot yet see, and that the providing is the seeing itself.